Welcome back to my channel. Today we uncovered a bizarre encounter between music and garbage. But the staff member joked to me any piano is just a piece of wood, while laughing off Tony, that Italian guy. Out of options, Tony had to persuade and swap for the piano. This was Tony's first glimpse of Don's enduring dark prejudice. After the show, Tony continued writing to his wife. Besides keeping track of the mundane stuff, she mentioned how her views on Don were starting to turn the ship, clearly indicating her changing perspective on black people during this time together. They began discussing their family lives, and Don revealed he once had a brother with whom he used to hang out often. However, after becoming a musician, he found that work put a dissonant note in his brotherly relationship, struggling to balance being a husband and a musician. Meanwhile, Tony spotted a KFC sign, which was his favorite thing, so he jumped out of the car to grab a bucket. Back then, they weren't delicacies for blacks, but stereotypes. Tony didn't care. He invited Don to join. But Don exclaimed he had never tried fried chicken, leaving Tony in shock. Don then said that Tony's views were quite narrow-minded. Just because he's black doesn't mean he has to love eating black food. Hearing this, Tony shared his insights as an Italian. His love for pizza doesn't mean Don would love it too. However, seeing this dignified musician still refusing to try fried chicken, Tony went on a real persuasion spree. In the end, despite his reluctance, Don was eventually moved by Tony's overflowing enthusiasm in his invitation, compelling him to temporarily set aside his personal prejudice and take a bite of the aroma-filled fried chicken. The enticing fragrance was simply irresistible. Not even a great musician could resist its charm. Soon after, Don tossed his chicken buns out the window, feeling liberated, and Tony excitedly launched his soda bottle out. And just like that, all their worries and biases against black food vanished into thin air. However, as they drew nearer to this particular moment, Tony meticulously arranged for a motel that accommodated black guests, based on the information found in the Green Book. He advised Don to reach out if he needed anything, then drove off to his own place. Meanwhile, Don sat alone by his room, sipping his drink like usual. Even dressed to the nines, he still couldn't fit into the local black crowd. Nearby, some black guys were playing games and invited him to join, but he politely declined. One of the guys wasn't having it and mocked him for thinking he was upper class just because he wore a butler's uniform. He then headed to a bar, only to accidentally stumble into a heavily racist white bar, where the surrounding tough guys looked down on him. Just as conflict was about to boil over, Tony swooped in like a superhero. The tough guys saw Tony alone and thought they could keep bullying Don, but Tony's fake gun move sent them into a panic. Back then, being Italian was basically synonymous with being in the mob. The bar owner stepped in to mediate, preventing a clash, and Tony made a successful escape. Leaving the bar, Tony scolded Don for the choice, and Don calmly replied, "Black folks face unfair treatment everywhere." Tony was speechless and could only warn him to avoid wandering off alone in the future. Because the farther they wandered, the more dangerous it would get, but Don cared more about whether Tony actually had a gun. After mental adjustments and a wits battle, Don still shone during the performance. Next day, they headed to their next destination, but shortly after taking off, the engine began to smoke. Tony got out to check, while Don stood in the sun, patiently waiting. This scene caught the attention of nearby black folks, looking on in disbelief, thinking, "What's with this white guy working for a black guy?" His noble suit couldn't hide the weight in his heart, and Don stood silently in the sun, overwhelmed with emotion. They shared the same skin color, yet a vast chasm of class still divided them. Alone, trying to cross this class mountain, left to freeze atop the social peak. Later, they arrived at Savannah in North Carolina, where Tony always refused to let Don introduce him during earlier performances. But this time, he took the initiative and declared himself Don's assistant. To treat Don well, the manor owner asked the black staff about their favorites and prepared a feast for him. But when he eagerly lifted the lid, it was fried chicken and corn, classic comfort food for black folks. Don quickly grasped the butler's intentions, a white stereotype of blacks. Tony, seeing this, hastily gestured to him not to mind and reminded him that they had already shared that label while in the car earlier. Don could only manage a forced smile and joined in the applause with the other guests. After dinner, the show continued as usual, but during intermission, Don tried to go to the restroom and got stopped by the butler. Witnessing this scene, Don felt utterly infuriated and replied with great forcefulness. He said if he couldn't use the restroom, I'd have to return to the hotel, a half-hour trip. This could affect the next performance, but the butler was totally indifferent. On the way, Tony expressed his confusion, thinking, "Isn't this just about a restroom? Why do they have to run so far?" Don insisted on going back, yet after the show, he still managed to chat with the guests easily. This confused Tony even more. He complained that Don faced unfair treatment. If it were him, he'd definitely show them what his fists are made of. And hey, don't forget to subscribe.